The courtroom was vast, echoing with the murmurs of 1,000 alien tongues. Towering above them all was the Galactic Council's central dais, carved from a single obsidian crystal that shimmered faintly under the sterile lights. At its center stood Counselor Rithan, a shimmering insected being whose mandibles clicked as the chamber quieted. "Humans of Earth," Rithan began, voice amplified through unseen technology. "This council finds your species guilty of violating galactic law. The unauthorized terraforming of 2 restricted planets and the deployment of bioweapons contravene our most sacred treaties. For this, sanctions are hereby imposed, effective immediately." The gallery erupted, alien delegations exchanging whispers in disbelief, amusement, or outrage. At the center of the chaos, Ambassador Elena Trask stood motionless, her face pale but composed. She clutched the edge of her podium tightly. "This verdict is an outrage," Trask's voice carried across the chamber. "The evidence presented against us is fabricated. Earth has adhered to every directive given by this council, every restriction, every sacrifice. We demand an impartial investigation." "The evidence is conclusive," Rithan retorted. "Protests are irrelevant. The vote is final." "Conclusive?" Trask's voice rose, sharp and cutting. "You refuse to let our scientists review it. You refuse to hear our defense. What kind of justice is this? Are we a council of equals, or a collection of cowards too afraid of what humanity might achieve?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. Counselor Tarlis, a reptilian delegate with scaled skin that shimmered green and gold, hissed from his seat. "Careful, human. Such accusations can carry consequences beyond sanctions." "And yet," Trask replied, her voice cold, "you have no answer for the truth. If you wish to destroy us, at least have the courage to admit it openly." Counselor Rithan raised an arm, silencing further exchange. "Earth's protest is noted and dismissed. Sanctions stand. Council adjourned." The chamber lights dimmed as Rithan's declaration echoed through the hall. Trask stood for a moment longer, jaw clenched, before turning and marching out. She passed rows of alien representatives who avoided her gaze, or, in some cases, smirked in quiet satisfaction. Captain Leora Kane sat in the dimly lit command center of Resolute Horizon, the flagship of Earth's unified stellar navy. The hum of the ship's systems was a familiar comfort, but today it was drowned out by the transmission from Earth. "The Council has imposed immediate sanctions." Trask's voice came through the speakers. "Trade routes severed, technology embargoed. We face a blockade of our colonies. They intend to strangle us into submission." Kane's crew exchanged uneasy glances. She stared at the monitor, her fists clenched. "Sanctions?" Lieutenant Ao asked from the communications console. "That's just the start. They'll push harder. And we'll push back," Kane said firmly. Her voice carried the same calm authority that had won battles and inspired loyalty. "They think they can isolate us, weaken us. They've underestimated what humanity does when cornered." Commander Varga, her second-in-command, stepped closer. "They've got the numbers, Captain. If it comes to war—" He trailed off, the implications clear. "Numbers mean nothing if they don't understand how we fight," Kane replied. "But this isn't just about tactics. We need to know who framed us and why." A notification chimed, and Ao's console lit up. "Incoming secure message from Earth Command." The screen flickered to reveal General Atwood, his sharp features drawn tight with exhaustion. "Captain Kane, your orders are as follows: protect critical colonies and supply lines at all costs. At the same time, investigate the source of this conspiracy. We need proof to counter their narrative." "Yes, sir," Kane replied, straightening. "But with respect, General, if sanctions escalate, defense won't be enough. They're trying to provoke us." Atwood's gaze hardened. "Then they'll learn what happens when humanity is provoked. You have your orders. Earth out." As the transmission ended, Kane turned to her crew. "You heard him. Ao, prioritize intel from our deep space probes. Varga, prep the fleet for defensive maneuvers. And someone get me our latest reports on Council faction movements." We're not just fighting ships, we're fighting lies. Let's find the truth. Hours later, Kane stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the endless void. The stars seemed colder tonight, their light distant and indifferent. She barely registered the sound of footsteps until Varga appeared beside her. "You're not one to brood, Captain," he said. "I'm not brooding," Kane replied without looking at him. "I'm planning." He smirked faintly. "Planning's good. You've always been good at it. But let me guess, this one feels different." She finally turned to face him. "We've fought battles before, Varga. We've fought wars. But this isn't just about survival. This is about identity. If they can paint us as monsters, they'll justify wiping us out. We can't let that happen." "We won't," Varga said simply. "Because if there's one thing we're better at than surviving, it's adapting." A small smile tugged at Kane's lips. "Damn right." On the bridge of Resolute Horizon, the atmosphere was tense as AO delivered his latest findings. "We've tracked unusual communication patterns between key Council worlds," AO reported. "Encrypted, high priority. And they all lead back to a faction known as the Erythian Consortium." Kane frowned. "The Consortium? What's their stake in this?" "They're a trade conglomerate," AO explained. "Heavy influence in Council politics, especially on resource regulation. If humanity expands too fast, we could threaten their monopoly." Varga leaned forward. "So they frame us, cripple us with sanctions, and maintain control." "Typical." Kane tapped her fingers against the console. "If they're behind this, they've made one mistake. They underestimated how far we'll go to expose them. AO, get me everything we have on the Consortium. Varga, I want a strike team prepped. If they want to fight dirty, we'll show them just how dirty humans can fight." The Consortium station orbited a gas giant on the edge of Council space, hidden behind layers of automated defenses. Kane's strike team moved swiftly, infiltrating the facility under the cover of a solar flare. The corridors were eerily silent as they made their way to the central server room. Kane's pulse quickened as she uploaded a data spike into the mainframe, bypassing security protocols. "We've got it," AO's voice crackled over the comm. "Logs, transmissions, everything. This is the smoking gun." Kane grinned, but the moment was short-lived. The station's alarms blared, and the sound of approaching guards filled the air. "Time to go!" Kane barked. As they fought their way back to the extraction point, Kane's resolve only hardened. They had the proof they needed. Now, it was a matter of surviving long enough to use it. "We're not just fighting for Earth," Kane muttered to herself as they boarded their shuttle. "We're fighting for the right to exist." The shuttle launched, and the station erupted in flames behind them. Kane's heart pounded, but her gaze was steady. The war had begun, and humanity would not go quietly. The Resolute Horizon drifted in the shadow of a dead star, cloaked from the patrols sweeping the region. Captain Leora Kane sat at the tactical table in the ship's command room, her gaze fixed on the flickering hologram that displayed enemy fleet movements. The Consortium's forces were tightening their hold, their ships cutting off every viable supply route to Earth's colonies. "Captain, this blockade will suffocate us in weeks if we don't act," Commander Varga said, his voice sharp. "The outer colonies are already rationing oxygen supplies. We can't keep dodging their fleets forever." "We won't," Kane replied. She traced a route through the hologram with her finger, pausing on a flashing point. "This sector here. Trella's Drift. It's where their supply chain bottlenecks. We hit them there, and we force them to loosen their grip." AO, seated at the comms console, turned to face her. "With all due respect, Captain, that's suicide. Trella's Drift is heavily fortified. We'll never get close enough to make a dent." "That's what they think," Kane said, her voice calm but steely. "We're not going in with brute force. We're going to use their own arrogance against them. AO, you're going to hack into their fleet's command network. Plant false signals, reroute patrols, and create gaps we can exploit. Meanwhile, the Resolute Horizon will deploy decoy drones to draw their fire." "Decoys?" Varga raised an eyebrow. You're betting everything on distractions? Kane's lips twitched into a faint smile. No, Commander. I'm betting on human ingenuity. While they're chasing shadows, we'll infiltrate their command station and disable their supply routes from the inside. They won't even see it coming. The room fell silent as the weight of her plan settled on the crew. It was bold, dangerous, and undeniably Kane. Understood, Captain, Varga said finally. I'll brief the strike team. We'll be ready. The strike began at the edge of the Trellis Drift. As the consortium fleet adjusted to the sudden influx of false signals, the Resolute Horizon launched a barrage of decoy drones, each programmed to mimic the signature of a human warship. The enemy's formation fractured as they scrambled to intercept the perceived threat. Inside the command station's docking bay, Kane and her strike team moved with precision, their boots silent on the metallic floor. The air was heavy with tension as they approached the control hub. Kane's earpiece crackled as AO spoke from the ship. You've got 10 minutes before they realize those drones are fake. I've cut external communications for now, but you'll have to move fast. Understood, Kane whispered. She motioned to her team, who fanned out, covering the corridor ahead. The control hub was a circular room dominated by a central console. Alien officers in shimmering uniforms worked at the terminals, oblivious to the intruders. Kane held up her hand, signaling her team to wait. She stepped forward, her weapon raised. Hands off the consoles, now! She barked. The alien officers froze, their eyes wide with alarm. One reached for an alert button, but Kane fired a warning shot that scorched the panel inches from his hand. I said now! The officers raised their hands, stepping away from the terminals. Kane gestured to her tech specialist, a wiry young ensign named Mira. Get to work! Shut down their supply routing protocols and redirect their cargo to uninhabited sectors. I want every transport they've got stuck in limbo. Yes, Captain, Mira said, her fingers flying over the alien keyboard. An alarm blared suddenly, and AO's voice came through the comms, tinged with urgency. Captain, they've figured out the drones. Patrols are converging on your location. You've got 5 minutes before you're surrounded. Kane gritted her teeth. Mira, how much longer? Almost there, Mira replied, sweat beading on her forehead. Just a few more seconds. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, growing louder with each passing moment. Varga took position by the door, his rifle aimed at the entrance. Kane, we've got incoming, he called. Hold them off, Kane ordered. Mira, double time it. The first wave of guards burst into the room, their weapons blazing. Varga and the others returned fire, the confined space erupting in a cacophony of energy blasts. Kane stayed focused, shielding Mira as she worked. Done! Mira shouted, pulling a data chip from the console. Supply chains are disrupted, and I've got their logistics data. We can use this to track their next moves. Good. Move! Kane grabbed Mira and led the team back toward the docking bay, firing over her shoulder as they retreated. The Resolute Horizon awaited them, its engines already primed. As soon as the strike team boarded, the ship blasted away from the station, narrowly avoiding the enemy's retaliatory fire. Back on the bridge, the crew erupted in cheers as the data Mira retrieved appeared on the main screen. The consortium's logistics network was in chaos, their supply lines severed. They'll have to divert resources to fix this mess, Vargas said, a rare smile crossing his face. It'll buy us time to regroup. Kane nodded, but her expression remained grim. This was just the beginning. They'll adapt quickly, and when they do, they'll come after us harder than ever. We need to stay ahead of them. AO turned from his console, his face pale. Captain, there's something else in the data. A communication flagged with the highest level of encryption. I cracked it, and you need to see this. He transferred the file to the main screen. The crew watched in silence as a holographic message played. It was from a consortium leader, addressing a shadowy council of figures. The humans are resourceful, the leader said, their voice distorted. But they are naive. The evidence we fabricated has done its work, and the council believes them guilty. Soon, their defiance will give us the excuse we need to eradicate them entirely. Humanity's rise ends here. The message ended, and the room fell silent. They're not just sanctioning us, Varga said quietly. They're planning our extinction. Kane stood, her jaw clenched and her eyes blazing with determination. Then we make sure that plan fails. We expose them, and we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. The crew straightened, their resolve matching their captain's. The battle had just begun, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The resolute Horizon slipped through the void, its systems running dark to avoid detection. On the bridge, the tension was palpable. Captain Leora Kane stood at the center, her arms crossed as the crew worked around her. Every screen flickered with data from the consortium's disrupted networks, the stolen intelligence now their most valuable weapon. Status report, Kane said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. Ao looked up from his console, his brow furrowed. The consortium is scrambling to re-establish their supply lines, but it'll take weeks. In the meantime, their fleets are repositioning, probably to tighten their blockade. Varga leaned against the tactical table, his expression grim. They know we're behind this. Every move we make is going to be under a magnifying glass from here on out. Kane nodded. Which is why we need to stay a step ahead. Ao, tell me you've decrypted more of that comm network. I have, Ao replied, tapping a few keys. And you're not going to like this. The consortium has sent out directives to their enforcement fleets. They're targeting our colonies directly. The orders are clear, they're not just blockading, they're eradicating. The room fell silent. Mira, seated near the navigation console, turned to Kane, her face pale. Captain, if they're hitting the colonies, we can't protect them all. We don't have the ships. We're not going to protect them all, Kane said, her voice firm. We're going to make sure they never get the chance to carry out those orders. She stepped closer to the tactical table, bringing up a hologram of the consortium's command structure. The orders are coming from their central flagship, Judgment Ascendant. It's heavily armed, heavily guarded, and currently positioned here. She highlighted a distant sector, at the edge of Council-controlled space. If we take it out, we cut the head off the snake. Varga frowned. A direct assault on their flagship? That's suicide. Not if we don't make it a direct assault, Kane replied. Ao, do we still have access to their communications grid? Barely, he said. They're patching holes as fast as we're exploiting them. Good enough, Kane said. We'll use their own network to feed them false intel. Convince them there's a critical threat in this sector. She pointed to a distant star system. And draw their escorts away from the flagship. Once it's exposed, we move in. And if they don't take the bait? Mira asked. Then we improvise, Kane said simply. But they will. The consortium's arrogance is their weakness. They think they're untouchable. The Judgment Ascendant was a fortress in the void, its hull bristling with weapons and flanked by a fleet of escorts. From the command deck, Admiral Lyrak, a towering figure with gleaming obsidian armor, watched as reports streamed in from his officers. Sir, one of them said, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Erythian mining colonies in the Sigma sector. Preliminary analysis suggests human sabotage. Lyrak's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Typical of these primitives. Divert Task Force Gamma to investigate. Ensure the colonies are secured. The officer hesitated. Admiral, that will leave our perimeter vulnerable. Lyrak's eyes narrowed. You question my orders? And no, sir. Then carry them out. Lyrak snapped. The humans are desperate and disorganized. They lack the strength or the intellect to pose a real threat. This is nothing more than a distraction. As Task Force Gamma departed, leaving the flagship with a skeleton defense fleet, a shadow emerged from the darkness of space. The resolute Horizon glided silently toward its target, its systems still cloaked. On board, Kane and her crew prepared for the most critical mission of their lives. Ao, are we clear? Kane asked. For now, Ao replied. Their sensors are still scrambled, But we'll light up like a supernova if we get too close. Then let's not get too close, Kane said. Deploy the infiltration team. Varga, you're in charge. Get onto that flagship and disable their weapons systems. We'll handle the rest from here. Varga nodded. Understood. We'll make it quick. The infiltration team boarded a small stealth shuttle and launched toward the Judgment Ascendant. Varga led the group through the flagship's maintenance ducts, avoiding patrols and automated defenses. They reached the weapons control center, a cavernous room filled with glowing terminals and alien technicians. Varga signaled his team to hold position. He drew a small device from his belt, a pulse emitter designed to disable electronic systems in a localized area. With a flick of a switch, the room went dark, the terminals flickering and dying. Move! Varga barked, and the team surged forward, securing the room in seconds. Varga placed a series of charges on the primary control nodes, setting the timers. Charges set, he reported over the comm. Weapon systems will be down in 5. Good work, Kane replied. Get out of there. Back on the Resolute horizon, Kane watched as the flagship's defensive grid flickered and went offline. All right, people, this is our window. Bring us in. The ship surged forward, weapons primed. The few remaining escorts scrambled to intercept, but they were no match for the Resolute Horizon's unorthodox tactics. Kane directed her crew with precision, exploiting every weakness in the enemy's formation. On board the Judgment Ascendant Asterisk, Admiral Lyrak realized too late that he'd been outmaneuvered. Restore weapons control, he roared, but his officers could only stammer excuses. Ao's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, I've tapped into their command network. Broadcasting now. On every frequency, across the consortium's fleets, the same message played, recordings of their leadership planning humanity's annihilation. The galaxy's eyes were on them now, and there was no denying the truth. As the Resolute Horizon unleashed its final salvo, striking the flagship's core, Kane's voice carried through the chaos. This is for Earth. The explosion lit up the void, and the Judgment Ascendant was no more. The Resolute Horizon limped away from the battlefield, its crew exhausted but triumphant. Kane sat in her chair, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. They had struck a blow not just for survival, but for justice. Humanity's fight was far from over, but for the first time, the galaxy had seen what they were truly capable of. The bridge of the Resolute Horizon was heavy with silence. Victory hung in the air, but its cost weighed heavily on every soul aboard. The flagship of the consortium, Judgment Ascendant, was destroyed, and with it, the enemy's centralized command structure. Yet the remains of humanity's fleet were scattered, battered, and running on fumes. Captain Leora Kane stood in the center of the bridge, her hands gripping the railing tightly, her mind racing through the possibilities of what came next. Status report, Kane said, her voice steady but lined with fatigue. Ao, his face pale and drawn, turned to her from his console. We've intercepted the fallout chatter from the consortium's fleets. They're in disarray. The loss of their flagship has thrown their entire chain of command into chaos. Mira, leaning over the navigation terminal, added, But it's not going to last. They'll regroup. And when they do, they'll come after us with everything they've got. We've bought time, not safety. That time will have to be enough, Kane replied. She turned to Varga, who stood by the tactical display, his uniform streaked with ash from the earlier firefight aboard the flagship. Commander, what's the condition of our remaining forces? Varga exhaled deeply. Not good. Most of the fleet's either gone or crippled. We've got enough firepower left to handle skirmishes, but nothing more. Supplies are critical, and morale is fragile. Understood, Kane said. She straightened, her expression hardening into one of resolve. We've dealt them a blow they didn't see coming. Now we make sure the galaxy knows the truth. Ao raised an eyebrow. You mean the broadcast? The one we intercepted on their comms grid? Captain, I've already uploaded it to every open network I could find, but with the consortium's influence. Not enough, Kane interrupted. We can't rely on the truth spreading organically. They'll suppress it, twist it, bury it under their propaganda. No. We take it straight to the Council itself. The room fell silent. Mira was the first to speak, her voice filled with disbelief. The Galactic Council? Captain, they sanctioned us. They're the ones who turned the galaxy against us. Exactly, Kane said. And that's why we go there. The Council may have been manipulated by the Consortium, but they still hold the galaxy's trust. If we can force them to see the truth, to acknowledge the Consortium's crimes, we turn the tide. Varga crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. And how exactly do you plan to do that? We're a single ship with no political capital and barely enough fuel to get to the next star system. Kane smirked faintly. The Consortium's arrogance works both ways. They've underestimated us this entire time. They'll never expect us to walk right into the heart of their power. We take the Resolute Horizon to the Council's capital, and we deliver the evidence in person. You're talking about the heart of Galactic Council space, Varga said, his voice rising. It's surrounded by defenses that could pulverize us before we get within a light year. That's why we don't announce our presence until it's too late to stop us, Kane replied. We'll use the data AO pulled from the flagship systems to chart a path through their security. Once we're in range, we hijack their broadcast network and force them to listen. Mira looked at her captain with a mixture of admiration and fear. And what happens if they don't believe us? If they decide we're a threat and wipe us out? Kane's gaze softened as she turned to Mira. Then we've done everything we could. If we die proving the truth, at least the galaxy will see what humanity is willing to stand for. It's not about winning. It's about showing them that we won't back down. The journey to the Council's capital was fraught with danger. The Resolute Horizon navigated through uncharted routes, dodging Consortium patrols and automated defense platforms. Every member of the crew worked tirelessly, knowing that any mistake could mean their doom. Tension mounted as they drew closer to the gleaming spire of the capital station, a massive construct orbiting a blue-white star. Approaching Council space, AO announced. Their perimeter defenses will detect us in 3 minutes. Kane stood at the bridge's center, her eyes locked on the growing image of the station on the main screen. Prepare the override protocols. As soon as we're in range, I want the evidence broadcast across every channel. Varga, standing at her side, checked his weapon instinctively. You know they'll send everything they have to stop us. They'll try, Kane said, a small, defiant smile crossing her lips. The ship crossed into the capital's security perimeter, and alarms blared across the bridge. Incoming hail from the Council Defense Fleet, AO said. They're demanding we power down and surrender. Decline politely, Kane said, her tone razor-sharp. And keep us moving. The Resolute Horizon surged forward, its engine screaming as it pushed past the limits of its capabilities. Enemy ships swarmed in, firing warning shots that barely missed their mark. Inside the bridge, the crew braced for impact. Signal jammer online, AO said. We've got 10 seconds before they brute force their way through. Let's make it count, Kane said. Initiate the broadcast. The main screen flickered as the Consortium's incriminating message began playing on every channel in Council space. Across the galaxy, species who had seen humanity as reckless and dangerous now witnessed the truth: the Consortium's plot to fabricate evidence, incite war, and eliminate humanity as a threat. The broadcast cut to Kane, her image projected to billions of viewers. This is Captain Leora Kane of Earth's Unified Stellar Navy. The evidence you've just seen is undeniable. The Consortium has manipulated the Galactic Council, orchestrating sanctions and war to mask their crimes. We stand here not as aggressors, but as a species fighting for its very survival. We demand justice, not just for humanity, but for every world that has suffered under their corruption. As the message continued to play, the Council fleet faltered. Ships held their fire, unsure whether to proceed. On the bridge of the Resolute Horizon, Kane's crew watched with bated breath. They're hesitating, Varga said. It's working. Let's hope it's enough, Kane said, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. A final hail came through, this time from the Council itself. A stern, multi-species delegation appeared on the screen, their expressions ranging from anger to curiosity. "Captain Kane," one of them said, "you have violated Council protocols by entering restricted space. However, the evidence you've provided demands investigation. Stand down, and we will guarantee your safety." Kane exhaled slowly, a wave of relief washing over her. "Acknowledged." Standing down? The crew erupted into cheers, but Kane remained composed, her mind already turning to the next challenge. Humanity had earned a chance to plead its case, but the battle for survival was far from over. As the ship docked at the Council station, Kane addressed her crew one last time. "You've all shown what humanity is capable of. Courage, resilience, sacrifice. No matter what happens next, remember this moment. We stood against the odds, and we made them listen. Now let's finish what we started." The crew nodded, their spirits lifted. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, hope burned brighter than fear.